Hey everyone, welcome to Spooky Tale. Today we're sharing some mix of Reddit stories like Bizzare and psychology. These are some of the most interesting stories I've found, and I know you'll enjoy them too. Whether you're relaxing, studying, or just in the mood for entertain, these stories are perfect for you. I'm glad you're here. Let's get started. My horrible experience with a drug called Dead Arm. I've been completely clean for about 2 years now, and I owe it all to the last drug I ever took. It apparently goes by many names, and it's not easy to get your hands on it. The people who use it only give it to close friends, or people who they mean to do harm. Nothing can prepare you for the experience, not even smack. Myself, I did Dead Arm when I was a senior in college. Finals were getting rough. I had a group of buddies that I took things with. Not exactly the type of friends your parents hope you'll make. None were students like me, just townies. All different ages from 17 to almost 60. None of us were alike in any way, except for the one thing we had in common, what we were putting in our bodies. We'd veg out high as kites, escaping the world, escaping our problems. The more pressure I felt in my normal life, the more I turned to smack to help me through it. I would never even associate with these other folks before I started using, but they were slowly becoming my only friends. There was this one dude whose house we went to that we only knew as Moses. He had a 2-bedroom apartment, but somehow we fit almost 15 of us in there to chill at parties that he threw. I hardly ever spoke to Moses, but he took a liking to me for some reason. He'd share some of his extra potent shit with me, at times buy me pizza and beer, and generally just acted cool. He must have been 40-something, but never had a stick up his ass or anything, very laid back. One day, I hit up Moses after failing a final and asked him if he was having a get-together that night. He texted back no, so I started making plans with other people. Like 10 minutes later, he texts me again. Actually, yeah, but can you just come? Don't bring anyone else? Naturally, I head over to his place because I want to get fucked up, regardless of who else is there. I knocked on his apartment door and he let me in. The place was empty. Whoa, man, where is everyone? I asked. Moses looked at me seriously, a look I had hardly seen on his face before. Hey, my name. Listen, you've been pretty chill and level-headed at my parties, and I want to offer you something. I'm going to this dude Ted's house tonight. He's got some of this new shit that he's super exclusive with. He's down for you to tag along, but you have to really keep it on the down low. You in? What is it that he's got, exactly? It's just... You'll see. But trust me, it's out of this world. You in? Bitch, you serious? You might as well have just described a Thanksgiving feast to a starving man. 10 minutes later, we had arrived at Ted's apartment complex. It was the dingiest shithole I had ever seen. Trash was lying around the front of the building, broken glass was scattered about, and the place just had a certain stink to it. Although I wanted to leave, my itch to get high was stronger. We went up to the 3rd floor, where Ted's apartment was. Moses had a brief conversation with whoever opened the door before we were let in, assuring him I was cool. Ted's apartment was even more disgusting than the rest of the building. Almost no furniture, just dirty blankets and towels thrown on the floor with like 10 people laying around on them, still as corpses. In the corner, someone was having sex with another person who looked barely conscious. All of them were moaning in such a bizarre way, almost like a death rattle from The Grudge, but a lot louder. It was freaking the fuck out of me, but I figured I wouldn't care about it at all soon enough. The doorman came to me and Moses. You guys ready? You know the deal, it's $150 for a hit. I've got it covered, Moses said, pulling out a small wad of cash. He gestured to me. It's this kid's first time doing Dead Arm. Get him first. He handed the cash over and the doorman grunted in approval. He took a belt from off the only table in the place, and from its drawer he conjured a syringe. It looked to be full of a brown substance that looked to me like liquid dirt. He wrapped the belt tight around my arm. Moses made conversation as the doorman got the needle ready. Where's Ted at? He asked. The doorman replied, In his room. Don't fucking bug him. Fair enough. No Ben tonight? Nope. Remember what happened to his arm last week? He's too embarrassed to be seen like that, I guess. Shoulda just cut it off. No doubt, brother. The doorman approached me with the needle. I nodded at him and he stuck it into one of the protruding veins in my arm. I watched the brown liquid leave the syringe and make its way into the bloodstream. As soon as the needle was out, I immediately and unwillingly dropped to the floor. My knees just stopped working. Everything stopped working. I couldn't move my head, arms, legs, even my mouth was hanging open. Completely numb, completely paralyzed. My head started ringing terribly. It was terrifying. I started to try and call out, but all I could do was moan, and I realized with a jolt that the noise I was making was not at all unlike the noises everyone else in this room was making. Then suddenly, the ringing in my head stopped and was replaced with such a deep relaxation that I cannot even describe to you through words. It was unlike anything I had ever felt, almost otherworldly carelessness. My paralysis suddenly did not matter. My finals did not matter. Nothing mattered. My muscles felt like they were being lightly tugged in every direction. It felt like my body was dissolving into a puddle onto the floor, and it was incredible. Not long after, I saw Moses fall to the floor by my side. The doorman stepped over us both and put the syringes he had used on us away. Then he went back to standing by the door, playing on his cell phone. An hour passed. Nothing but pure bliss and silence, apart from the moaning and the humping in the back. Soon, though, that latter noise stopped, and suddenly this bare-naked dude was standing above me, the guy who was doing the banging. He crouched down to me, this hungry look in his eyes. I didn't care. I couldn't care. All that mattered was that I was lying down, with my muscles being deliciously pulled by whatever this shit in my veins was. Unable to move. Unable to think. Only existing at bare minimum. The naked stranger started whispering something to himself and licking his lips. He got closer to me, his face mere centimeters from mine. "Hey!" the doorman yelled. The naked stranger was yanked off of me and thrown into the apartment wall. The doorman raised a fist to him threateningly. "What the fuck do you think you're doing? You paid for that one in the back, not this one. Come on, man, let me have this," the naked man screamed. "Is this going to be a fucking problem? Do I have to bring Ted in here?" I heard the naked man whimper in fear. He shook his head, hustled to grab his clothes, and then ran out of the apartment with them. And still, I was on the floor without a care in the world. Almost raped by a stranger, and couldn't be bothered to give the slightest shit. I lay there for another hour. Slowly I felt myself coming back down to earth a bit. Although I still couldn't move or think straight, I started becoming a bit more aware. I wondered how long I would be like this. I wasn't worried about it, it was just genuine curiosity. I also started to ponder about where this dead arm stuff could have possibly come from and what was in it. Call it my inner conscience, call it God, or call it voices in my head. But something answered my bemusement. Don't worry about where I'm from. Just keep yourself still. You belong to me right now. I could live with that. Another hour gone by. Discomfort started coming into my lower back. I still couldn't move, but it was a bit of a relief knowing that my body was starting to respond to the things around it. Shit, even the relief itself was a relief. Some of the other people around me who were on dead arms started to come out of it and stumble out of the apartment, thanking the doorman as they passed. By then it was like 2 a.m. At probably around 2:30, the doorman got off his phone and went out of my sight. I heard him knock on a door, most likely to one of the bedrooms, and call out, "Yo, Ted, I'm out, man. You still got 6 or 7 out there, so just a heads up." Although I could hear noises in response, I couldn't exactly tell what was being said. The doorman spoke again. "Yeah, all right, man. Have a good night." The doorman came back into my view, stepped over me, and walked out of the apartment. Another hour passed when I heard one of the doors in the back open. At the same time, someone came walking out. One of the people who had been high on the floor started coming to. A woman. I heard her say to someone softly, "Oh, hey Ted, thanks for the hit. Do you think you could help me to the door? My legs are still a little numb." The noise that replied almost completely killed my high. It was a mix between a scream and wet gurgle. If I had heard it a couple hours ago, I wouldn't have cared, but I could feel myself coming down and I was suddenly absolutely terrified, but still couldn't move. 2 pairs of feet started making their way towards the door. One after another, 2 people came into my line of sight. The first was a 30-something blonde woman. She was stumbling a bit, using the wall as support before making her way out the door. Couldn't recall exactly what she looked like. But the second person I will remember until the day I die. He was a man, but unlike any person I have ever seen, before or since. His body looked like it had been stretched, pulled every which way like elastic. His arms were so long that his fingertips were touching the floor. His jaw was so wide open that the entirety of his mouth had to be at least a foot long, and it was full of jagged, broken and yellow teeth. The skin under his beady eyes was black and sunken. The hair on his head was grown in uneven patches. Brown patches were all over his face, arms and legs, and they were disgustingly leaking a similar colored liquid onto the floor. It looked quite a lot like dead arm. This man was practically inhuman. Nobody in the human race, regardless of our breakthroughs in cosmetics, looked like that or was ever supposed to look like that. It was a fucking monster standing over me, and even still I could not move. All I could do was scream, and even then not very loudly. When I did, the wet, beady eyes of the monster person looked down at me. The thing's head cocked slightly and a look of confusion came over its face, as if it couldn't understand why the fuck I was screaming at the sight of it. It shook its head and walked out of my view, which terrified me more. I didn't want to look at it, but I also didn't want to be unaware of what it was. My mind was racing furiously, wondering what I should do, if maybe somehow I could roll myself to the door. Number? Just relax. You belong to me for now, remember? It's not so bad. Just look at Ted. That fucking thing was Ted. I tried to fight the overwhelming urge to just lay there, but found myself just as helpless as before. The straining to move at least one of my muscles was fruitless and started paining me greatly. Suddenly my muscles weren't relaxed, they were flaring up. It hurt so badly I didn't even scream, I just passed out. When I woke up, I was myself again, and I immediately started screaming as the memory of what went down last night came rushing back to me. Moses, who looked like he had just woken up himself, was crouching next to me instantly. "Dude, get a hold of yourself," he yelled. "Relax." I told him everything that had happened, from the naked stranger to the voices I had heard after taking the dead arm and the oozing monster that had come out of the back room. Throughout my explanation, Moses' face fell. He said in a low voice, "You need to leave right now. Ted's insecure enough as it is, and you're not going to help by calling him a fucking monster. Thankfully for you, he's asleep right now." "What the fuck? Dude, he was stretched out. He didn't even look like a person." "Side effect of the dead arm, man. Ted knows how to party. Are you fucking telling me that we could end up like that if we keep using that shit? Dude, don't you remember how good it felt? Are you telling me it's not worth it?" By the time he finished his sentence, I was already out the door. I got out of the apartment complex and turned my head. From one of the windows on the third floor, I saw a glimpse of Ted, the monster person, staring down at me with those tiny eyes, the impossibly wide jaw still agape in a permanent state of relaxation. I screamed and sprinted away. I couldn't help it. Ever since that night, I refused to touch another substance. I never spoke with Moses or the old crew again, and I never even once walked near Ted's house. Not long after my night there, he was gone and I never got the invite to come back, and part of me was glad. He's what I was afraid of the most, because I know someday I'm going to end up just like him. I'm off drugs now because nothing can compare to Dead Arm, nothing at all. I'll find it again and will use it. This is one addiction that no amount of rehab can help. The relaxing helplessness, the stillness of the mind. Oh, and that soothing voice too. I hear it even today all the time whispering to me, "You're still mine and I know you'll come back." I found my wife's obituary online, but she's sitting right next to me. I am chronically online. I Google lots of things and people when I'm bored. I've Googled my own name before, along with friends, acquaintances, conspiracy theories, and random internet sundries. But last night was the first time I'd Googled my wife's name, and I found something I'd never forget. The first hit was an obituary. Of course, I assumed it was someone with the same name as her. Her first name is Emily, and her last name is pretty common. Not going to share it here because I don't want to be doxxed. But I clicked it anyway, just out of curiosity. My heart fell through the floor when I saw a photo of my wife on the website. Blonde highlighted hair, dark eyes, and the dates matched up too, 1986 to 2012. According to this obituary, she died when she was 26. I met her when she was 27. There's no way. I thought. This must just be someone who looks like her, with her name and her birth year. But I knew it was too many coincidences to be wrong. When I read the actual obituary, it only cemented things for me. It mentioned her love of horses, her volunteer work at a soup kitchen through her church, and her work as a biologist postdoc. So many details matched up, there was no way it could be a coincidence. "What you looking at?" I jumped as my wife came in from the kitchen and sat down next to me. On instinct, I slammed the laptop shut. "Nothing," I said. Then realizing how suspicious I looked, I added, "I was looking at birthday gifts for you." For a second, her face froze, and I was worried she wouldn't buy my lie. But then she smiled, that warm smile I loved, crinkling her eyes at the corners. "That's so sweet," she said, coming to sit next to me. I swallowed. "Yeah." She cuddled up next to me, but I felt completely on edge. The warmth of her skin no longer felt warm and inviting. In fact, a chill ran down my spine. After a few minutes, I extricated myself from her embrace. "I don't feel good," I lied. "I'm going to lie down." "Oh, okay," she said, pouting. Before she could say anything more, I ran upstairs. As soon as I got on the bed, I brought up the obituary again. I stared at the grainy image of her face. It was definitely her. That warm smile, those mysterious dark eyes. There was no way it could be anyone else. I scrolled through some of the other results, and I realized some of those too were related to her death. There was a Facebook memorial page, friends posting on it, names I didn't recognize, mourning her loss more than 10 years ago. The university she worked at had put out a statement with their condolences as well. But then I found something that made my heart stop. A news article nestled at the bottom of the search results page. Emily hadn't just died, she'd been murdered. My jaw hung open as I read the news article. Phrases popped out at me. No signs of forced entry, partially dismembered, and killer still at large. The news article didn't have a photo of Emily though, so maybe this was a different Emily. It had to be. It couldn't be my Emily, who was sitting on the couch watching TV downstairs. A sound jolted me out of my thoughts. The door to the bedroom creaking open. Emily stood in the doorway, oddly still. The hall light was off, shrouding her face in shadow. Emily?" I asked, my voice shaking. "I came up to check on you," she said in a soft, cool voice. Thanks," I said, quickly turning off my phone and slipping it behind me. "I'm feeling a lot better now. I'm fine." "I'm glad to hear that," she said, her voice going lower. I tried to keep my cool as she climbed into bed with me. I lay there, stiff and cold, as she wrapped her arms around me. "I love you, baby," she whispered, as she cuddled with me under the covers. "I love you too. So that's where I am now. I'm writing this from my phone, as Emily sleeps next to me. I don't know if I'm safe here. I don't know who or what I'm dealing with. All kinds of crazy scenarios have been floating through my mind. Did Emily have an identical twin that died, and she took over the twin's identity? Is she some horrible creature from folktales who killed Emily and took on her appearance? The more minutes that tick by, the wilder my theories get. None of them make sense. There's only one thing I'm sure of. Whoever, or whatever, I'm sleeping next to isn't the real Emily. My dad is a chair. The title doesn't lie. My dad is a chair. To be specific, he's a fully upholstered, bright orange angel accent living room chair. The kind with wooden legs you'd find in any three-piece suit from the 70s. He's pretty comfortable, truth be told. A little lumpy in places, but his padding is soft. Warm too. He's always warm. There's also the telltale ba-thump, ba-thump, ba-thump coming from his back cushion, a steady rhythm at my lumbar to remind me I'm sitting in no ordinary chair. He wasn't always a chair. Until last year he was Kevin the accountant. He was 51, slightly overweight, and generally seemed to enjoy life as a human. He was married to Mom. He still is, but, well, as you can imagine, it's a little complicated now. It was funny at first. He came home from work one day and just sat in a corner of the living room. When we'd ask him why he was sitting on the floor and not the $4,000 cream leather couch, he'd just smile and say, "It feels right here." It stopped being funny the morning he didn't go to work. Turns out he hadn't slept the night before. He'd been watching a movie with Mom but hadn't gone with her to bed. She left him sitting in his spot, unsuspicious of the "I'm not tired, I'll be up a little later" lie. She and I both begged him to get up, but he refused to move. Phoned in sick at work, the whole deal. Just spent the day sitting on the floor in his corner. We kept asking him what was wrong, why he wouldn't get up except to use the bathroom, and he just kept saying, No, this feels right." Mom phoned the doctor around the third day of this. He'd stopped eating or drinking, you see, stopped getting up to use the bathroom too. Surprisingly though, there weren't as many accidents as you'd think. Once he'd allowed the last of the food and drink to leave him, it seemed to stop coming. We also didn't hear his belly growl despite going a day and a half without food. The doctor couldn't make sense of it. Their first guess was that it was psychosomatic, but that wouldn't explain the absence of digestive activity exposed by the stethoscope. They said they'd be back to take some blood samples in a few days after they liaised with some colleagues. Unfortunately, as I said, this was last year, 2020. We never heard back from the doctor thanks to the virus that shall not be named. I guess guy with gut troubles who refuses to move is low on the priorities list during a global pandemic. Somehow Mom managed to wrangle long-term sick leave with Dad's company. Decades of loyal employeeism combined with Mom's attendance of every company BBQ and softball game helped Mr. Bannerfrag buy the unexplained stomach concern requiring hospitalization. Excuse. I'll never forget that phone call. At the time, Dad losing his job was the worst-case scenario for both of us. He'd always been the breadwinner. Neither of us could support ourselves without him. We'd lose the house in under a year. Dad didn't seem too perturbed by Mum's frantic pacing or the lies she wormed through the phone to Mr. Bannerfrag. He just stared at the wall, serenely, hovering his butt half a foot from the carpet, balancing with his legs bent and his hands flat on the ground behind him. That night I fell asleep listening to Mum yelling at Dad. He never yelled back. We started noticing the physical changes a few days later. That's when we realized this wasn't psychosomatic. Unfortunately, our shitty, best insurance deal on the market doctor wasn't picking up the phone. We'd get passive-aggressive emails informing us they were waiting to hear back from colleagues, but that was it. This was not good, especially not when the joints in Dad's arms and legs had fused. The not goodness of the doctor's silence increased 1,000-fold when we sent photos of Dad's hands and feet flaking off like discarded spider husks the following week. Did the response change? Number, we got a very snippy email about shortages on ICU wards and the critical international situation. Mom's shouting match with the chief of medicine, the one she demanded her way up the phone chain to speak to, didn't change things. We were on our own. Mom spent all her time in the living room with Dad. I'd help her wash him, try and make him eat, talk to him when she'd tire out and fall asleep on the rug. Every day of this routine brought with it new changes in Dad's body. It started with his limbs, as you can probably guess. When his hands and feet fell off, there was no blood. They flaked apart, crusty and dry and brittle throughout. Even the bones of his toes and fingers had the density and consistency of dead skin. The wrists and ankles they left behind were smooth and hard. It was difficult to tell whether we were looking at flesh or exposed bone. The dark shining surface seemed to blend into his normal arm at the base of the stumps. This discoloration would rise further up his limbs daily, and before long I awoke to see Dad's head and torso fused to the wooden chair legs supporting my weight while I write this. Well, I use the term Dad's head and torso in the loosest possible sense. By the time his limbs were completely replaced, the rest of him had undergone a slow, harrowing transformation of its own. His shoulders and the arms attached to them descended lower and lower. They found their final resting place at Dad's pelvis, sat squarely behind his rigid legs. The chest area they'd left behind had its own problems. Day by day, Dad's neck retracted further inwards. It didn't stop when his jaw met collarbone either. It pulled Dad's head deep into his ribcage. His face flattened as the skull supporting it sank, forcing his eyes to point in opposite directions. Eventually, they slid down to where his nipples once lay, resting glassy and vacant on his pecs. The change wasn't quick enough to break his jaw, though. Instead, it bent outward, its hinges spreading wide across Dad's broad chest. Each morning I'd find Mom sobbing over a fresh, unnecessary piece of himself he'd discarded. Hair, ears, nose, his thingy. All of them flaked off and crumbled to dust in her hands. He lost the ability to speak as his head withdrew. Unsurprising though, right? He made his intentions clear before he went. The last words he ever said to me, "Don't cry. I am Chair, always was Chair. Happy as Chair." That was the worst part, I think. Knowing that, whatever the fuck was happening to Dad, he wasn't resisting it. That when he got that initial urge to sit in the corner and not get up, he didn't fight it. That he was happy this way. The implication being that when he was human, when he was a father and husband and accountant, he wasn't. Sadly, I still don't know why or how Dad became a Chair. I didn't post any photos, you see. Mom wouldn't let me, didn't want the embarrassment, wanted to keep Dad's dignity intact. Thing is, I agreed with her and kind of still do. I'm glad. I didn't go to the socials with pics of Dad at various stages of his journey. The temptation was there to see if anyone could help. Nobody could have though, could they? Dad would have become just another internet circus freak. I've done enough research and digging over the months to know that whatever happened to Dad, he's the only one. Well, almost only. Mom's own changes started around the time Dad's skin was rethreading into orange fabric, and his eyes had hardened into plastic buttons. Her change was a little different. It started in her torso, stretching her day by day while she remained in crab pose. I must say, she makes a great couch. Her transformation may have been a little more distressing, but the end result is better. Sorry, Dad, it is what it is. I think the worst part with Mum was the despondency. Dad was so serene as he changed. Mum, though, Mum wouldn't stop weeping. Quiet sobs, tears that fell for a few days even after her own eyes had become flat plastic. She wasn't crying because of the change, though, I think. I think it was because she wouldn't get to see how beautiful I'll look when I go through my own metamorphosis. Thing is, I get it now. Dad was right. He was Chair. Mum was couch. I am coffee table. I always was. I was scared at first when I realized. The truth hit me like a piano dropped from the Empire State Building. I was scrubbing the last of Mum's remaining human skin when it struck through every bone in my wrong body, just as it must have done both Dad and Mum. I spent that whole night sitting on Dad, tears falling down my cheeks, staring at my spot. I didn't want it to be true. I screamed for it not to be, more than once. I couldn't deny the facts I knew deep down to my bones, though. That spot, the space on the rug in front of Chair Dad and Couch Mum, is for me. It's mine, where I belong. Unlike blissfully accepting Dad and weeping resigning Mum, I fought it for a few days. I'm not like them. I'm only 17. I have had dreams, ambitions, goals. I wanted to go to college, settle down, marry some lucky guy, be a mom. I wasn't ready to give up my human form. I spent my nights begging for more time. Nothing answered. The urges didn't abate. My awareness of reality now, the illusions had been swept away, was too great. When I have slept this last week or so, my dreams have always been the same. I dreamt of true reality, of how I now know things should be. I dream of me in my place, my body elongated and wooden and flat as is right, as is correct, as is natural. I have long, blissful slumbers filled with the feeling of hot ceramic mugs on my tabletop and thick carpet beneath my 4 legs. I can't fight it anymore. I'm posting this here, but also printing it out to leave as a note for the removal guys. I want them to be careful with us when the bank repossesses the house and we end up in storage. Please keep us together if you can. We're a set. Dad's sick leave ended months ago. As you can imagine, the foreclosure notices have been piling up. I stopped caring about the pile of mail under the door around the time that Mum's ribcage split and flattened into her wide pinstripe velvet upholstered back. I haven't been hungry in days, or thirsty. I'm not even sure if I'm breathing now I think about it. I'm still scared, but I've come to accept that this is the way things have to be. I don't know why, they just do. Maybe it's a curse. Maybe this house is buried on some ancient ritual site. Maybe it's just some freak anomaly of physics. Who knows? Whatever the reason, I have to suck it up and accept the way things are. This body, this walking, wobbling mass of skin and bone and gibbly bits that I love so much isn't right. It isn't mine. I'm not meant for it anymore. Once I post this and print the copy for the removal guys, I'm going to get in my spot. Then it's just a case of closing my eyes and waiting. I can already feel my limbs pulling inward, my thighs and upper arms sliding to where they'll meet at my navel in a few days. There's a tugging on the back of my knees where they'll bend in on themselves, and all 20 of my fingers and toes grow number with each hour that passes. Do I have any regrets? Thousands. There's so much I'll never get to do, to see, to go, to be. I can't hide from the truth though. Not anymore. I am coffee table.